No one ever told me, ever, that my father was blind from birth. He was born without a retina and eventually lost most of his hearing. He never saw my face nor anything in this world, but he was my greatest inspiration and had the greatest impression, left the greatest impression on me, if you could only imagine. He used to say to me, "Honey, you're the one who is handicapped because you can see everything and you judge everything by how it looks." He taught me and showed me how to see that life is how I choose to pursue it, to perceive it, I thought he was normal when I was little. And gradually, I started seeing that he was different, special. Hard to explain, and I don't know exactly when it happened, but gradually, I started seeing that he didn't quite see things the way that I did. When I got a little older, I said, "Daddy, is it like you're looking, is everything black when you look out of your eyes?" And he said, "No, it's like looking out the back of my head." And so I would give him things and show him things, and he would put his hands over it and say, I see. I tried to see what he saw, but of course I saw it differently. But his interest and his curiosity in everything made life always very interesting. Our conversations were interesting and a lot of fun. He didn't ever seem to be afraid of anything. We could go horseback riding, climb on boulders, over fallen tree trunks, and he would just put his feet where I told him to put his feet. So what did that do? Build trust in me and trust in him. He said, "If you're ever afraid of anything, just go ahead and do it anyway. Fear will go away eventually." I believed him. He didn't just ask questions. He asked active questions. So if he asked me a question, it was like he was listening, but he was trying to get me to speak more about whatever it was. And I watched him do this with everyone. And there was always touching involved because he wanted to be physically close to whoever he was speaking with. Sometimes if it was just his hand on someone's shoulder or even on their knee, but he liked to be close. So what I perceived was that there was never any boundaries with him or with anybody, which makes me to this day it's hard for me to have boundaries. I like being close to people as well. There was a time after I finished becoming a nurse when my mother found out that she had cancer, and the doctors told her she had less than 5 years to live. And she said to me, she knew I was going to take care of my father, and she said to me, "See the world, see it now, and don't feel guilty about it." So she gave me that permission, and thus began my life's journey outside of my family. I'd already become a nurse. When I got my camera, I wanted to try to capture the feeling that I had when I would look at anything. I wanted to be able to connect my vision with my feelings with whatever it was, and I know that that was connected to wanting to show my father what life was like. So when I started traveling, these are women from Ladakh, which is kind of western Tibet, part of India. I never pointed my camera at anyone's face without their permission. The wonderful thing about that is that it gave me the opportunity to try to approach people all the time, whether it was through a smile or just trying to communicate with them. And you can see that, these people are so indicative of many people I've met in life. I think that most people are very relationship oriented. And no matter how much fear we might have traveling in the world, when you approach someone and you try to connect with them, they want to do the same thing too. They want to ask you questions and share experiences and have that exchange, even if we don't have anything apparent in common, which is interesting, even if we don't speak the same language. But it happens all the time to me. In the mid-'70s, I used to mountain climb a lot. In the mid-'70s, I made one of my several journeys to the Himalayas, and I had just finished this 22,000-foot peak, and I was about to have a very remarkable experience. 3 of the porters that we were with asked me in Garhwali, which directly translated meant, "Please go come foot up my village home." And I was able to translate because while on this expedition, I had a little spiral notebook that I kept in my pocket. And every day I wrote words on it. And pretty soon, I had several of them, thank goodness, it was filled with words that were important to them. Their names, their wives' names, children's names, the words in Garhwali for flowers and trees and plants and food, weather, anything that I felt would be important. And Jotsing, this is Jotsing. He's one of them. He was their lead porter. And after spending all this time with him, he became very much like my brother. So he invited me to the village. And my climbing partners were ready to come back to the U.S. I wasn't ready. And I had been there before, and I felt very comfortable traveling by myself. So I went with these guys up to their village. This is Asari and Neti. These women, the women in this village, had never seen a woman of my skin color. They had never heard of the United States, and they didn't know the world was round. The most commonly asked question to me was, "How far do you have to walk to carry firewood home, back to your village?" They thought I lived on the other side of the mountain. And they asked me, "How long will it take for you to walk back to your village?" Pretty amazing to think that, and it was in the mid-'70s, and never hearing of the United States. They're very secluded. These 3 women are from that same area, just in the next village. But one thing that I have learned is you don't really have to speak their language in any place that I have found in the world. All that you have to do is have an interest to connect with them. And show that interest. Listen very intently. Look at them and have a passion for life and learning. And you really don't have to speak any language. It all comes across in how you look at each other and connect like that. It's an amazing thing. And I feel completely confident about that with every place that I've ever been. This is my adopted Indian mother. She had no daughters. She had 6 of her sons had died when they were young. Her only living son and child was Jotsing that you just saw. That village adopted me like I was one of their own. And I have returned many, many times. In a little bit less than 20 years, I went back there, I don't know, 9 times, I think. And these people have given me a remarkable gift. Through their generosity and their graciousness and letting me come in and live life with them in their homes and talking about, by this time I could speak Garhwali with them well enough. But they would share their secrets with me, their griefs. And of course, their mortality rate was actually quite high. But to be able to share that with a village that has never heard of where you live, never heard of your country, and to be so open. We talked about anything and everything eventually. And they had such a direct interest in how I lived as well. They couldn't even imagine where I lived. By them doing that, it's like it obliterated all boundaries. The next subject that I want to talk about is Mother Teresa. It took me years to have the courage to ask Mother Teresa to take her picture. We met by accident. It was 1973, and I was just taking a walk. She didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize until 1979, 6 years later. And the way it happened was I had been on another climbing expedition in Nepal at this time, also in the 22,000-foot range. And one of our porters died. He was a Buddhist Sherpa. And he froze to death in a whiteout. We were in an 11-day storm, and we ran out of food. And he tried to find food for us. Even though we didn't want him to go, he left anyway and went with another Sherpa. The other Sherpa found his way back, but this Sherpa died frozen, and we couldn't find him until the end of the storm. So after that happened, we carried his body back to his village and tried to help his family. And for me, working in the Tibetan Refugee Center was a way that I felt that I could give back, because this guy died trying to save our life. So one day, when I was on a walk from the Tibetan refugee camp, I just see this little sign. It says, Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa's Home for the Dying and Destitute, near Malhirde, which is the Indian word for pure heart. So I see this little sign, and I thought, I'm going to go in there and see what's going on. I mean, it's about like this big. So I walked in, and I see this room that is filled with cots, filled with people that were dying and destitute. And I see two Indian women with these blue and white saris. And pretty soon, there's another one, third one actually. I saw two, and this other one walks up to me, little tiny woman, and introduced herself as Mother Teresa. And she said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Maybe I think I can help you." But I decided that I would, instead of working at the refugee camp, I decided that I would try to volunteer there, because there were so many people and so few nuns. So I still didn't know really who she was. I'd never heard her name. And it took me a while to realize, but I still didn't. It took me quite a while to realize who she really was in the world sense. And then, of course, not getting the Nobel Peace Prize until 79, there was 6 years, and I knew who she was, but she wasn't really world famous. So I'm thinking, what can I tell you all about this incredible woman who donated and contributed and gave her heart and soul to helping people, to serving the poor and the downtrodden in the world. She wouldn't like to have me hold her on a pedestal. She wouldn't be happy about that. But we used to spend our days, especially in those early years, we would take people, we'd go out into the streets and take people, bring them back into the home, remove their unclean clothes, their dirty rags, and we bathed them from a bucket of cold water on a small cement slab. Then we would carry their bodies over to a cot, one amongst many, and give them food. I spent a lot of my time as a nurse giving injections, sterilizing syringes and needles in a very small little autoclave, and changing the wounds and cleansing the wounds of the lepers who were kept separately. I worked in a couple of orphanages in Delhi and Calcutta, but I spent a great deal of my time with the dying and destitute. I had wanted so much to take a picture of them sometimes. It's hard to say that, but I really wanted to because I was afraid I'd forget. To this day, I have never forgotten. I remember every one of those pictures in my head. In December of 1992, I called Mother Teresa in Calcutta. She answered the phone. I said, "What are you doing answering the phone?" And she said that she would meet me in Delhi, where I started with her 20 years before. And this was after, it was nine times I was there. A lot of people, most people in the world, associate her with the poverty of the world, with helping the poor. But most people wouldn't know this other part of her. First of all, when I went there this next time, I finally had the courage to ask her if I could take her picture and if I could record her saying her prayers. The other thing that I want to share with you is something that is very special to me. I had been raped, terribly brutalized, and left for dead in another country by 3 men. I was living with nightmares and fear and anger as well, very apprehensive about going out, but I had gone there specifically. And she was the one who helped me in a period of time forgive these men. I can't even tell you quite how she did it, but praying with her, talking with her, it's a part of her that is very special to me in addition to all the other work that she has done in the world. I started searching for my own meaning of life when I was a little girl, and I used to follow my daddy around and say, "Who's God? And where is God?" And he always said, "Look, God is everywhere, but seeing has to come from within you." He taught me that it is looking within. He said you have to have an attitude of gratitude, as we've heard from many people even today. He said that all my life. You have to have an attitude of gratitude, but even more importantly, you have to practice it every day. Because without practicing that every day, it's not going to mean anything. Because of my mother's grace and blessing and generosity of spirit, I have had a very, very full life. But ironically, so did she. She lived 35 more years. And my husband and I got to have her live with us in Billings, Montana, where she was able to start an endowment for the visually impaired, which we contribute to now and will continue for the rest of our life. In your life, take pictures in your heart, because you never know when, where, and how those pictures are going to affect your life. Life is about the passion, the perception that you have, and not making boundaries. Thank you very much.